to say that Matthew 19 makes all polygamy a sin, you must also say that Matthew 19 makes all divorce a sin, which it does not. Now let's start from the beginning of these verses, where the Pharisees come and ask Jesus, can a man divorce his wife for any reason? They're going back to the law. I believe it's found in Deuteronomy. I'm pretty sure it's Deuteronomy 2:4, but I'm not sure of that off my head. Where the law states that if a man or if a woman finds no favor in her husband, and he finds fault, and he finds uncleanness in her, then he is to hand her a bill of divorcement in her hand and send her away. That's what they were talking about. You have to remember, at this time, there were two schools of thought on that verse, which is what the Pharisees were asking. One of them is from the school of Shammai, which taught that the uncleanness that it's referring to is fornication, is basically sexual immorality. And then there's the school of Hillel, which taught that means that a man can divorce his wife for any reason whatsoever, even for something as stupid and mundane as she burned his breakfast toast. And they were asking Jesus' opinion, which he gives, and he sides with the school of Shammai that you can only divorce your wife over fornication. And part of his response to that was he harkens back to when Adam was talking in the Garden of Eden, where Adam was either talking to A, God, which nobody can give laws to God, or B, Adam was talking to Eve, and basically what I understand as giving marriage vows, because you cannot separate the verse before that from that. The verse where Adam says that she is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman. And for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Those two verses go together. And like I said, that's either his marriage vows to Eve, or he was talking to God. But we must remember, Adam was not a lawgiver, and nobody can give a law to God. God gives you the law. God was just using that verse to confirm what the Bible already says on divorce in the law, that you can only divorce your wife for sexual immorality. That's all he was doing. He was not using it to change the law, to add to the law, to take away from the law. He was not using it to put creation above the law. Well, in fact, if you actually read every place where it uses creation in the New Testament to prove a point, it's always confirming one of two things. It's confirming Christ, or it's confirming what's already written in the law. Okay, with that said, let's go on. And what was Jesus' next part? He said, because that they are one flesh, let no man separate what God has put together. And then the Pharisees came, also asked him, then why did Moses allow for divorce? Remember, they're not saying strictly why did Moses allow any divorce. What they're asking is what they asked originally. Why did Moses allow divorce for any reason? And Jesus answered them, because of the hardness of your heart. Now referring back again to the original question, the question for divorce for any reason, Jesus basically said, referring back to that is why Moses allowed divorce for any reason. But from the beginning, there was no divorce. And then Jesus goes on to say that, and he also said this in chapters beforehand, that except for fornication, you cannot divorce your wife. In fact, that's what it said in a few chapters beforehand. And then now it goes on to say that if a man divorces his wife, referring back again to the original question about divorce for any reason, Jesus then says, except for fornication, and marries another, then he has committed adultery. Adultery meaning that the only legitimate reason to divorce, biblical reason to divorce, is for fornication, which is exactly what the law says back in Deuteronomy. Is that the only reason you can divorce your wife is for fornication, is for sexual immorality. That's it. And then he goes on to say, and he causes his wife, not ex-wife, but his current wife, because they are improperly divorced, not divorced lawfully under the law, he causes her to commit fornication. And any man that marries an improperly divorced woman is committing fornication. Okay, so as you can see, if you actually compare scripture to scripture, you find out that all that Jesus is doing is confirming what the law already says about divorce. That a man can only divorce his wife for fornication, and that anything outside that scope of what's given in the law is sin. Then, so now my question is, if that's the case, and Jesus is only using the creation especially to confirm what the law says, then how can you use, then it must be the same at the most. Most, is confirming what the law says about polygyny. Especially Exodus 21:10. 10, where it says, if a man takes another wife, her food, clothing, and marital rights, he shall not decrease. So, if he's using the creation to get rid of that law, which Christ never does, he uses creation to confirm the law and to confirm Christ, and he's using that law to confirm the only reason for divorce is divorce that's lawful under the law. Well, then you must also say that the only polygamy that is sinful is polygamy that is not confirmed to be right under the law, which would disqualify, just like in divorce. Divorce would disqualify any divorce that is not lawful under the biblical law. So in polygamy, that would mean that a woman having multiple husbands is not lawful. It's a sin for that. A person, or how would I phrase this? A group marriage would be is unlawful under the law, but a man having more than one wife is not unlawful under the law, because the law gives rules on that, so it cannot be unlawful when the law says this is how you do it. So Jesus, as you can see here, never used creation not only to get rid of all divorce, but only to get rid of divorce for any reason other than what the law already states is the only reason why you can divorce. So, in the same token, it only gets rid of the polygamy that is not covered under the law. And the only form of polygamy that's covered under the law is polygyny.